Today you join me at the wheel of the third generation Punto, the Grande Punto. Is it grande? Let's find out. Hello, welcome to Furious Driving. I'm Matt and this is a Punto Grande, or Grande Punto, whichever way you prefer. And believe it or not, this, the third generation of car to wear the Punto badge, came out in 2005. That makes it 15 years old. Which is older than it looks, really, isn't it? Now, like in your favourite purveyor of caffeinated mochaccino, frappe latte, iced macchiato things, Grande means a little bit bigger, and it is a little bit bigger because this car is built on the GM Small Platform, or SCCS, or Small Common Component System platform, which is easy for you to say. So it shares its underpinnings with quite a few other small cars of the early to mid noughties. For example, the Corsa D, the Vauxhall Adam, the Alfa Mito, the Fiat Doblo. Everything from the Fiat Chrysler range in this kind of size is this car underneath, basically. So compared to the first two generations of Punto, which were very closely related, this is very much a clean sheet design. In fact, letting you behind the curtain of how I make these videos, I do a lot of research before I come out on these shoots, and one of the places I will obviously look is Wikipedia, because there's a lot of good trivia on Wikipedia. But there's one gem just here, which I'll have to read to you word for word because it's too good not to. A large number of components are new, including the chassis and body shell. I think that's most of it really, isn't it? Now, while Ulrich Schmuller from GM and Giorgio Cornacchio from Fiat developed the underpinnings of the car, the exterior is clearly a Giugiaro design, as it was previously in the first two generations of the Punto. You see, it's very much an evolution of that shape, that little kind of jelly bean, but it's just become a little bit wider, longer, more bulbous. It's become a little bit wider, a little bit longer, a little bit taller, but more bulbous, which is really for pedestrian safety, so that you've got a bigger space between the engine block and the sheet metalwork outside. So you notice a lot of cars during the noughties that became more front heavy, if you like, as they've had to increase the space inside the engine bay purely for pedestrian safety. But they've still managed to keep quite a cute looking, fun, friendly face. And this is one of the big selling points of this car, is that it is a really cool thing. It's got that lovely Italian summer vibe going. Even in black it still looks, well, it's a little hint of sinisterness, but sinister but fun. Now, with the GM small car platform, this was obviously designed to take a whole range of different engines and transmission systems. It can even take four-wheel drive, so things like the Jeep Renegade are based on this car as well. In the Punto, there were multiple engine options. So it's a 1.2 and 1.4 litre Fire 8 valve, making 65 and 77 horsepower, and there was a 1.4 litre Starjet, making 95 horsepower. Then there were the diesels, a pair of 1.9s, making 120 and 130 horsepower, although they were both replaced with a 1.6 in 2008. Or there was the 1.3 litre diesel, which was arguably a smoother ride than the 1.9, although obviously less powerful, making 65 or 90 horsepower, as this car has with the variable geometry turbo. Now, when the Grande was revealed in 2005, it was a massive step up from the previous generation. The second generation car was at that point still looking good, but felt a little bit dated. And this is a nice place to be. It's big, it's spacious, the buttons are well laid out, although some of the plastics are a little bit less premium and a bit more clunky than you might expect in, say, a premium brand car like an Audi A1. But this is a small car. This is the city car market where expectations and the price point are very different. So from that point of view, it's absolutely fine. It looks good, it doesn't rattle, which is key. Now, there were 3 trim levels, and this is the top level Eleganza, which means it's absolutely loaded, and someone went to town with the options tick boxes on this particular car, because we've got everything on it, as well as all the nice standard stuff like electric windows and air conditioning. We've got cruise control, we've got leather seats, which you never see in a Punto, and they're very comfortable as well. Let's take a walk through the car with our eyes and see what we find. We're starting with the driver's door. Everything is black plastic and lots of it. There's a nice little metallic detail of the slash cut style door handle here, which is made of plastic, and that kind of segues into a tweeter, which is quite cool. And below that, in the front of the door, we've got a big, more mid-range speaker, so we've got decent audio for the front of the car right there to start with. We've got electric mirrors left and right, and in the driver's door, controls for both electric front windows. And below that, we've got, well, fairly small, to be honest, little door pocket. You maybe get a couple of CDs in there, but it's way too small for a drink or anything like that. It's really a phone and wallet, and that's kind of the limit. Now, ahead of the door in the A-post, we've got these little curious quarter-light windows, because the A-post just slopes away such a long way from you, and it's a big, thick A-post as well. That's virtually useless on the driver's side, but you can just about see if anything is tucked down by your front wheel. But on the passenger side, it's more handy to make sure nothing's in your blind spot, maybe when you're parking. But yeah, it'll be quite a large dead spot without those little quarter lights there. And the dashboard itself goes such a long way, I could barely touch the end of it. The entire dashboard is multi-coloured, multi-textured shades of black and grey, so it does have a fair degree of visual interest going on. The big black top area is a kind of a fake leatherette kind of hard plastic, and this main area here, sort of going from left to right, is kind of a pretend carbon fibre weave almost in sort of a silvery grey with little accents in kind of a satin silver brush. And the central area here, where the heating and ventilation and other controls are, is kind of a painted metallic finish as well. So we've got kind of 3.5 different finishes going on all around the place. That could be a bit messy and a bit too much, but this actually kind of works out pretty well, to be honest. Now here in this gap between the door and the Speedo, there's a little panel here with 7 buttons. So you've got your front and rear fogs, which are actually quite well placed to find, because so many cars have them hidden in places under the dashboard. So as you're driving into bad visual conditions, struggling to see, you've then got to try and look under the dashboard to find the fog light button. No, they're right here, easy to see. And you've got lights up, lights down, so if you've got heavy load in the boot, you can level your headlights. And then plus, minus and menu buttons for controlling the onboard computer type functions. All kind of easy to reach, easy to get your hand onto, barely have to move your hand off the steering wheel. So that's well done Fiat for a bit of sensible design. We've got lots of ventilation going on around here. You've got 4 movable vents, 1 either side, 2 in the centre, and 2 little top vents above the side vents pointing permanently at the window, so you can't stop breeze blowing on the glass. You can actually drive down the motorway and you see someone with all their windows misted up on a car that's barely 10 years old, and you think, how is that even possible on a car like that? It's going to have air conditioning. How are you misted up? These little vents will hopefully prevent that happening and protect morons from themselves. Now, looking through the steering wheel, we've got our dials. Quite classy and busy looking. We've got speedo on the left, rev counter on the right, and counter-rotating fuel gauge and temperature gauge, all highlighted with chrome bezels and little chrome circles around where the needle pops out and anchors down, and lots of extra little lineage to make it very visually interesting. It looks great when you're sat here looking at it, but I'll be honest, when you're actually on the move, it is a little bit busy and it's slightly harder to read than it needs to be. The numbers have become not necessarily the biggest, most important thing on the dial, and more, they're very big and clear on the rev counter, but with a speedo is you've got red lines at 30, 60 and 70, but it's still a little busy to sort of glance down and see in a hurry. With a number of speed cameras and average speed checks and things that are around these days, it would be nicer to have slightly bigger, more legible numbers there. Then we've got 3 stalks on this particular car, wipers on the right, indicators and lights on the left, and cruise control down here, which not every Punto is going to have. But this is an Eleganza, and a loaded one as well, as I've just said. Going with our nice leather seats, we've got a nice leather steering wheel as well. This thing feels good in your hands. It's big and it's chunky, it's got lots of sculpting going on. It's a pretty cool thing to grip onto. It makes it feel very sporty indeed. It's a multi-function wheel, so you can take control of the radio, your phone. There's a Windows button as well, so if you happen to have some kind of Windows type device, you can link into that and take command of that. Are there still such things as Windows devices? I'm an Apple user and I seem to remember them vaguely from a while ago, but I haven't seen a Windows device in a long time. Now the centre console's got a lot happening here. Obviously we've got the 2 air vents, and then we've got a nice little row of sub controls. Opening the boot because there's no button on the back of the car. Steering wheel, got city mode on this thing, so you can make the steering wheel so light you can just breathe on it to go around corners. Central locking, hazard lights and ASR off, because we do have stability control on this car. And we've got a radio with a CD player below that, FM, AM. It does what it says in the can, really. You can remove it with the standard 2-prong pin fork things and get a blanking plate. So if you wanted to update this to a more modern DAB or sat-nav integrated single DIN head unit, you could do that. And moving down again, we've got HVAC, heating and ventilation controls, set to mono, turn your aircon off, recirculate, max and heated rear window, and then all that kind of stuff. And having just driven here on a very hot day, it's around 24, 25 degrees, I consider that very hot. It blows nice and cool. I'm afraid I've failed the cup test today because I left the cup in my car when I drove off in this one. So I'm going to have to do a recap to this when I return to my vehicle. But I'm going to say these 2 cup holders, which are down here in the centre, are very small and are going to struggle to take anything more than an espresso. This is an Italian car and they've prepared you for an espresso on the move rather than a big gulp. In front of that is a little tiny cubbyhole which has got actually an exact model of this car rolling around in it. And behind that, a 5-speed manual gearbox, which is quite a nice little thing with a leather gear knob on it, which is great. And then we find the first of our power outlets. There's a power outlet here, and there's also a USB socket in the glove box as well. And it looks like there's another storage tray here behind that, but it's not. It's just a place for your knuckles to fall into when you take the handbrake off. Now we do have this armrest here, which is kind of comfy. If you're on the motorway, it's quite nice to relax onto that. It's leather topped as well, and you push the button, you have a little bit more storage in there. But when it comes to actually driving the car, as in changing gear, taking the handbrake off, I do find, unless it's right down the very bottom, you can't get the gears in and out, and it's right down the bottom, you can't get the handbrake off. So you need to put it up there for the handbrake, but then you can't change gear. I think they had exactly the same thing in the Alfa 147, and I hated it in that as well. But it's here, and it's comfy, so, but I'll tuck it away for now. And finally, there's one more little hidden button down here, which is the lumbar control, electric lumbar control for the driver's seat. So yeah, extra comfort for you if you're driving this car. So a quick look in the back. I'm guessing from that creak, the back door doesn't get used too much. But it's a proper three-seater with 3 headrests and 3 seat belts, and it's all leather, and you've got seat back pockets here as well, grab handles, and an extra light for the rear seat passengers, so you're not completely riding in poverty spec, although you're kind of sitting in coach in terms of legroom. It's better than the old Puntos were because it's a slightly bigger car with more space inside, but with the seat in my position, this is a little bit on the tight side, I will be honest. My feet have got quite good room to move around, but my knees are very cramped. Wind up, keep fit windows, same little slashy door handle, and also you've got twin speakers again. Tweeter in the top, mid-range in the bottom, so again, great audio in this car, which is nice. I do like the little white piping in these leather seats, it does look so cool. He's like an Italian suit in here. Also worth mentioning, although the knee room's not that great, the headroom is extremely good. You could quite happily sit here for a while and be very comfortable. As I said, there's no button on the back of the car, so you either need to use the key fob itself or the button underneath the radio. The boot isn't bad size. It's grown from the previous generation. It's 275 litres with the seats up, or 1030 with the seats down, which is pretty impressive for a car in this class. It's all carpeted, there's a little light up here, and there's another power outlet up here as well, so it's a pretty practical and useful vehicle, really. Now before I set off, I'm going to just pull away without putting the seatbelt on, just to give you a demonstration of this little bing. You think the Volvo is bad, but it's tick tick tick. Let's get above 10 miles an hour on an industrial estate, so I'm not driving illegally. Okay, I'll put my seatbelt on. I surrender. Well, I've just pulled away, and let's try immediately on a roundabout the city button. Oh, hang on, I've got Range Rovers. Is city activated? I can't tell. Yes, it is. Yeah, the word city came up on the dashboard. And it is an awful lot lighter. If you find moving a power-assisted steering wheel just a bit too much, that city button is for you. Personally, I find it a little bit too easy to get judder into the car with that on. It's just too ready to shift and wiggle and jiggle. So I'd much rather have a little bit less of an excitable steering input, to be perfectly honest. Now let's throw some stats your way. We've pulled off in the 1.3 litre 90 horsepower diesel, which some consider to be the pick of the bunch if you're doing more than 12,000 miles a year. Certainly it is. It makes 90 horsepower and 200 newton meters of torque, which means it's good for 0 to 60 in 11.9 seconds, which may not sound ball of fire rapid, but in this category of car, that's actually pretty good. And the top speed is also 109 miles an hour. Again, pretty good. This dial does go up to 150, but that's more there for things like the Abarth and the SS, which are significantly quicker, but kind of hard to come by these days. Now with the Grande came a lot more equipment. Everything got alloys, air conditioning, electric windows, electric heated mirrors. That was standard across the board, and as you moved up through the range, sport seats came into the sport package, but then they were eliminated in the Eleganza for comfort seats. And then you had options of things like cruise and the leather seats which we have here. If safety is your bag, listen no further. I mean, literally, don't listen anymore, it'll scare you. When it was first tested, back when it was released, it got 5 stars Euro NCAP, which is really good. But because of the way technology and safety has progressed and developed, when they retested it in 2017, it was actually downgraded to 0 stars, which is not good. Now, that doesn't mean the car is any less safe than it was before. It's not suddenly going to kill you any more than it would have done 10 years previously. It's just things like all the other different airbags, they've found places to hide them, accident avoidance things that now exist in the electronics of the car weren't a thing back then. And so now those all count heavily towards the star rating, and so that's why it was downgraded so heavily. It's not intrinsically a bad car now, but on paper, it doesn't look so great anymore. Now, most of the time on the road, the 1.3 diesel isn't too intrusive. It pulls well, it's relatively smooth, and you don't really notice it making much noise. Just every now and then, when you give it a bit of welly, push it a bit harder, then you get that kind of diesel-y sound creeping into the cabin. Now, this small car sector is one of the fiercest out there, and when this came out, it had proper competition. The old Mark II Punto had been fighting its corner bravely, but it was looking a bit old against things like the Corsa, the 208, the Polo, Seat Ibiza, and of course the Fiesta. The Fiesta really is arguably the best of the bunch in this category, but the Grande Punto, the Mark III, is such a good looking thing. If you're buying your car as much as it looks on the drive as it handles on the road, then the Grande Punto really is an absolute winner. Now, reliability hasn't been too bad for these things. Now, bear in mind, there were 12 recalls on the Grande over its lifetime. So if you're buying one second-hand, do check with Fiat that yours has been in and had everything done to it that needs to be done to it. But overall, things don't really fall off them that much. The interior, it doesn't rattle. It feels pretty solid, but as I mentioned earlier, the controls, the plastics aren't that solid feeling, if you know what I mean. They're a little bit plasticky, a little bit light. There's not that kind of lovely tactile resistance you get from, say, a Mercedes when you flick the switches, or even a Rover R8. It's quite interesting when you indicate, you've got an artificial electronic beepy sound for the indicators rather than an actual tick, tick, tick. They made these things all over the world. Mostly they were knocked out of Italy, but also they were churned out in Brazil and in India. From the Brazil plant, they were sold all across South America. It was even the first Fiat to be sold in Australia since 1989, from 2002 until 2006. It didn't actually last that long in that particular market, so we won't talk about that too much. The ride is fairly firm. It's quite a solid, sporty feeling ride. Even this comfort version is quite taut feeling. And the steering, well, I've got the city mode turned off. There's nothing coming towards us, so I can give it a... It's quite impressively controlled. It doesn't feel like it's going to fling you off the road at all. And the steering wheel, the big, chunky, sporty weirdness, feels great in your hands. It's really good. And looking around the car, the overwhelming feeling is of airiness, and these big tall windows make it feel like you're driving in like a cathedral or something. So you don't have to worry about banging your head, not seeing out. As I mentioned earlier, that A-post window down there is virtually useless, but that one is quite handy. I guess obviously you do have to have left and right windows for building the car for left and right hand drive markets. It would look kind of odd if it was lopsided like that. That Project 199, as the Grande was known internally, was actually only built for 7 years, up until 2012. Although in 2009, it wasn't exactly replaced, but it was slightly superseded by the Punto Evo, which kind of came in and sat slightly above it in the range. It kind of pushed this down into more of a trim level rather than a car in its own right. It's kind of hard to put into words, really, what exactly they did. I'm not sure if even they know, to be perfectly honest. Fiat's strategy of the early noughties are just weird, and I don't think even they knew what they were doing for a long time. This car comes with a 5-speed manual gearbox, and later on a 6-speed manual was offered instead. And the one to really avoid, though, is the clutchless dual logic semi-automatic automated manual thing, which is available on the 1.4 petrol. Yeah, avoid that one. It's not the best. This gearbox is quite nice, actually. It's a nice chunky change from one gear to the next, and the gear knob itself and the gear shifter itself is a good solid size in your hand. It's nice. In terms of the tactile experience of being in the car, they've kind of done quite well on the main things that you touch a lot. As I say, the steering wheel, the gear knob. It's the secondary things like the door handles, the control stalks, just feel a little bit flimsy in comparison. Oh, 159. I don't think a camera would have caught that. Oh, 2 159s. I do love an Alpha 159. If anyone wants to give me an Alpha 159, I'll happily accept it. Now, between the speedo and the rev counter, you do have a nice little LCD display, which is a little bit hard to read with sunglasses on. It tells you your MPG. We're doing 68 MPG, or 78 MPG, because we're doing quite slow miles an hour at the moment. It tells us it's 26 degrees centigrade. It tells us whether or not the headlamps are leveled. It's a lot of useful bits of information in here. And it also says this car's only done about 61,000 miles, and to be honest, it looks like it's done even less. This is clearly a nicely looked after motor. So here we have a post-road test T-shelf challenge, and well, car in neutral, the cup will just about slide in, but it's at an angle, so oh, that's not good. You're going to get one in at best. So we're looking at small cups, small bottles, nothing significant. As I say earlier, the espresso and the tea shelf is a dangerous place to be, and that's been cleaned today, so that's just slidey. This whole tea shelf experience, dangerous. It's a 1 out of 10. Sorry, Fiat. Well, thanks for joining me today on a day out in possibly the most well-appointed Punto Grande ever made. This is absolutely spectacular, this particular Eleganza, and I've really quite enjoyed driving it, so thank you very much to the owner for the loan. If you've enjoyed this, please hit like, please hit subscribe as always. You know all the good stuff to do. Share and share alike, and I'll see you again next time in whatever I'm driving next time.